There we go. I do record this. I'm still debating on whether or not to actually put these readings up on YouTube for you guys to enjoy anytime, and then maybe finishing reading it on YouTube. Meaning, like, I would finish reading wherever we had left off from, and I would finish it for on YouTube. So it would be like maybe our each reading would be like one chapter, so it'd be like chapter or like several chapters. So I might do that. I think that'd be nice. So then you guys can get the entirety of it. But I have to look at YouTube's terms of service to make sure that I can actually read it. I know that there are some Edgar Allan Poe poetries on there, but I still need to make sure that it's okay with YouTube. So that's one thing. Oh my gosh, my throat is already bad and I haven't even started. By the way, with my face tracking leaning back, that means I'm drinking my tea because I'm gonna need a lot of it with this. So, anyways, let us begin. So, this is from Victor von Frankenstein's point of view, and he is telling the story to our friend that was writing the letters earlier on from last time, Robin Walton. I think Robert Walton. Sorry, I keep wanting to say Robin Williams because the RW. No joke. I actually used to read it as Robin Williams, and I was like, his name's not Robin Williams. His name's Robin Walton. But yeah, so there will be some parts of Victor actually taking us out of his past readings. Hi. Okay, how are you? I am good. We are going to be starting the reading of Victor von Frankenstein, talking to Robert Walton about all of his history, all of the past, and how it has led to him being where he is, chasing after the monster that he had created. And yeah, I will say about chapter 5, so maybe next time is when we'll start to get to see him more go into the building of the monster, because I read ahead a little bit. So next time we'll probably be actually getting into a lot of what's going through Victor's head and how he creates the monster and why he creates it. But of course we must start with childhood. And Victor starts out with chapter 1 by saying, I am by birth a Genevius. That means he was born in Geneva. And my family is one of the most distinguished of that republic. My ancestors had been for many years counselors and syndics. Oh my gosh. Syndics. Sorry. And my father had filled several public situations with honor and reputation. He was respected by all who knew him for his integrity and a story about an asshole. Hold on. Oh my gosh, I'm trying to remember how to. An indefatigable attention to public business. The story of Frankenstein is actually much more philosophical, and you'll see that later on. It brings in a lot of questions of what is truly morality and what is truly science, and how far are you willing to go in order to actually progress science. And does that mean that the morals, do you have to bring morality into science, or do you throw science away? Or does philosophical ideologies also create that of science? It's very interesting when you start getting later on into the chapters. You'll see from Victor's point of view how interesting it actually is. But actually, Victor von Frankenstein is not an asshole, and you'll learn more about it. I will say that Universal and what they have done with Frankenstein is definitely not how Frankenstein is. Well, I'm gonna half watching. I'm making brownies. Well, this is more of a listening stream than it is anything. So go on ahead, make your delicious brownies. So, he passed his younger days perpetually occupied by affairs of his country. A variety of circumstances had prevented his marrying early, nor was it until the decline of life that he became a husband and father of a family. As his circumstances of his marriage illustrate his character, I cannot refrain from relating them. One of the most intimate friends of his was a merchant who, from flourishing state, fell through numerous mischances into poverty.
Get 1 month of premium free. Tap this banner to learn more.
Well, I will say, Victor is not much of an asshole. I'd say he's more of a he has a massive ego.
Say hello to Anchor from Spotify, the powerful app that lets
You'll see further on.
with just one tap.
Oh my gosh. This man whose name was Beaufort, Beaufort, sorry, was of a proud, unbending disposition and could not bear to live in poverty and opulence in the same country where he had formerly been distinguished for his rank and magnificence. Having paid his debts, he refrained. Having paid his. Wait, hold on. Same country where he formerly distinguished the rank, of his ranks and magnificence. Voice, voice to text. Oh my god. I did mean self. Yeah, he's pretty self-absorbed. We'll get to it. We're on only chapter 1. Having paid his debts, therefore, in the most honorable manner, he retreated with his daughter to the town of Luciner, where he lived unknown in the wretchedness. And in wretchedness. That means that he lived very poorly. My father loved Beaufort with the truest friendship, and has deeply grieved by his retreat in those unfortunate circumstances. He bitterly deplored the false pride which led his friend to conduct such little worth of the affection that united them. He lost no time in endeavoring to seek him out, with the hope of persuading him to begin the world again through his credit and assistance. Sorry. Beaufort had taken effective measures to conceal himself, and it was 10 months before my father discovered his abode. Overjoyed in his discovery, he hastened to the house, which was situated in a mean street near Rousas. But when he entered, misery and despair had welcomed him. Beaufort had saved but a very small sum of money from the wreck of his fortunes, but it was sufficient to provide him with sustenance for some months. And in the meantime, he hoped to procure some respectable employment in a merchant's house. The interval was oh my goodness. Be in mind that it is actually very hard for me to read aloud because I know what the word says when I'm reading it in my head, but my head sometimes does not remember how to say the word, and then is like, this word does not exist in the English language. And I know what the word is. Consequently, there we go. The interval was consequently spent in inaction. His grief only became more deep and rankling when he had leisure for reflection, and the length it took to fast hold of his mind, that at the end of 3 months he lay on a bed of sickness, incapable of any exertion. There we go. His daughter attended him with the greatest tenderness, but she saw the despair that their little fund was rapidly decreasing, and that there was no other prospect of support. But Caroline Buford possessed a mind of an uncommon mold, and her courage rose to support her in her adversity. She procured plain work. She planted. Oh my gosh! Hold on. Let me turn down the music in my ears a little bit. Sometimes. Oh, sorry, I'm not looking at the right paragraph. But Caroline Buford possessed a mind of an uncommon mold, and her courage rose to support her in her adversity. She procured plain work. She plaited straw, and by various means contrived to earn a pittance scarcely sufficient to support life. Means that she she basically got paid less than minimum wages here. We all know how it is. But hey, it's enough to at least possibly get some money in the sickly health that her father is within. Several months passed in this manner. Her father grew worse, her time was more entirely occupied in attending him, her means of subsistence decreased, and in 10th month her father died in her arms, leaving her an orphan and a beggar. This last blow overcame her, and she knelt by Buford's coffin, weeping bitterly when my father entered the chamber. He came like a protecting spirit to the poor girl, who committed herself to his care. And after the interment of his friend, he conducted her to Geneva, and placed her under the protection of relation. 2 years after this event, Caroline became his wife. Should have sold ankle. What? Oh my God. Stop! Stop! First off, this is Victorian England. They were not as modest as yeah, no, modesty was thrown at the wing. Only stop. Can I continue? So Caroline Buford is now the wife of Victor's is now Victor's mother. There was a considerable difference between the ages of my parents, but this circumstance seemed to unite them only closer in bonds of devoted affection. By the way, this is Victorian England. It was not uncommon for like a 50-year-old man to marry a 17-year-old woman, okay? That's just how it was. You didn't last very long as a lord or lady in this day and age. There was a sense of justice in my father's upright mind, which rendered it necessary that he should approve highly to love strongly. Perhaps during former years he had suffered from the late discovered unworthiness of one beloved, and so was disposed to set a greater value on tired worth. There was a show of gratitude and worship in his attachment to my mother, differing wholly from the doting fondness of age, for it was inspired by reverence of her virtues and his desire to be the means of, in some degree, recomposing her of the sorrows she had endured, by which gave inexpressible grace to his behavior to her. Oh my gosh, that was all one sentence. Holy shit, that was like 4 fucking lines. One thing I do hate about Victorian writing is that You think that there is hard run-on sentences that we make. No, Victorian England had so many of them. And honestly, this sentence is written very correctly, but oh my gosh. Everything was made to yield to her wishes and her convenience. He strove to shelter her as a fair exotic is sheltered by the gardener from every rougher wind, and to surround her with all the cloud could tend to execute pleasurable emotion in her soft and benevolent mind. Her health, and even the tranquillity of her hitherto consistent spirit, had been shaken by what she had gone through. During the 2 years that had elapsed previous to their marriage, my father had gradually relinquished all public functions, and immediately after their union they thought the pleasant climate of Italy, and the change of scene and interest attended on a tour through the land of wonders, as a restorative for her weakened frame. So they moved to Italy. I feel like a lot of people do that. They like move to Italy in order to get a different frame of mind. Oh, you know what I just realized? Where is I've never known where Geneva is. I gotta look that up. When the monster is shy. Oh my gosh, stop. Oh my gosh, did you seriously make that pun? That's a beautiful pun. That's a great grade A pun right there. Right there, folks. Look at that. From Italy they visited Germany and France. I, their eldest child, was born at Naples, and as an infant acquired them in their ramblings. I, I remained for several years their only child. Much as they were attracted to each other, they seemed to draw inexhaustible, hold on, inexhaustible stores of affection from a very mine of love to bestow them upon me. When the creature can sing, go. Oh my gosh, we're gonna keep going. Someone needs to make that into a song. I swear. I'll sing it after stream, okay? Write this all down, Jose. I'll do a little sing. I'll do a little jig and I'll do a little singing after this. Oh, you like my voice? Oh, thank you. I actually, just so you all know, I did actually take theater for 2 years, and one of the things that we wanted to do for a musical was we actually wanted to do, because we had done like a play. Why? Why? Anyways, we had actually done a Agatha Christie play, and then we wanted to keep the horror theme going, and we wanted to do Little Shop of Horrors, but our director said no, and we were very upset. We did something else instead, but it was still pretty fun. But I did take acting, so that's why I'm able to kind of do these interesting voice inflections. So everyone's always said I've been really great at reading because the way I want to read to you is like how audiobook narrators read to people. That's what I want to do. Maybe I could. Maybe I should look into that as a job. My first one should be Frankenstein, you know? Anyways, let's continue on with reading. But thank you. I did fix a lot of the stuff on my mic, so now I do sound a lot better, I will say. Oh, Obley books, yes. Obley books. The same. Oh, yeah. My mother's tender careness and my father's smile of benevolent pleasure well regarding me are my first recollections. I was their plaything and their idol, and something better, their child. The innocent and helpless creature bestowed on them by heaven, whom to bring up to good, and whose future lot it was in their hands to direct to happiness or misery, according as they fulfilled their duties towards me. With this deep consciousness of what they owed towards the being of to which they had given life, added to the active spirit of tenderness that animated both, it may be imagined that while during every hour of my infant life I received a lesson of patience, of charity, and of self-control, I was guided by silken cord that all seemed but one train of enjoyment to me. For a long time I was their only care. My mother had much desire to have a daughter, but I continued their single offspring. When I was about 5 years old, while making an excursion oh my gosh, I know this word. Front. Beyond the frontiers of Italy, oh my gosh, they passed a week on the shores of the lake of Como. Their benevolent disposition often made them enter the cottages of the poor. This to my mother was more than a duty. This to my mother was more than a duty. It was a necessary. It was a necessity, a passion, remembering what she had suffered and how she had been relieved. For her to act in her turn the guardian angel to the afflicted. During one of their walks, a poor cot in the foldings of a veil attracted their notice as being singularly desolate. Oh my gosh. Descolacet. I don't know what that means. There's certain words in here that I know what they mean, but when I start saying them, all meaning of words go out the window. While the number of half-clothed children gathered about, it spoke of penury in its worst shape. One day, when my father had gone by himself to Milan, my mother, accompanied by me, visited this abode. She found a peasant and his wife, hard-working, bent down by care and labor, distributing a scanty meal to 5 hungry babes. Among these, there was one which attracted my mother far above all the rest. She appeared of a different stock. The 4 others were dark-eyed, hardy little vagrants. Monk. No, this child was thin and very fair. Her hair was the brightest living gold. And despite the poverty of her clothing, seemed to set a crown of dissensation on her head. Her brow was clear and apple, her blue eyes cloudless, and her lips and the molding of her face so expressive of sensibility and sweetness that none could behold her without looking on her as a distant species, a being heaven sent, and bearing a celestial stamp in all features. Yeah, she do be among us. She do be among them. Oh my gosh. The peasant woman, perceiving that my mother fixed eyes of wonder and admiration on this lovely girl, eagerly communicated her history. She was not her child, but the daughter of a Milanese nobleman. Her mother was a German, and had died on giving her birth. The infant had been placed with those good people to nurse. They were better off then. They had not been long married, and their eldest child was but just born. The father of their charge was one of those Italian nursed in the memory of the antique glory of Italy. One among the I'm going to butcher this is Italian. Schiavacci Orgur Fermantia. Actually, I didn't pronounce that too bad. Who exerted himself to obtain the liberty of his country. So basically, he's a very high-ranking nobleman official. He became the victim of its weakness. Whether he had died or still lingered in the dungeons of Austria was not known. His property was confiscated. His child became an orphan and a beggar. She continued with her foster parents and bloomed in their rude abode. Fairer than a garden rose among dark-leaved brambles. When my father returned from Milan, he found playing with me in a hall of our villa a child fairer than a pictured Cupid. A creature who seemed to shed radiance from her looks, and whose form and motions were lighter than the Chamios of the hills. The appreciation was soon explained. The apparition was soon explained. With his permission, my mother prevailed on her rustic guardians to yield their charge to her. They were fond of the sweet orphan. Her presence had seemed a blessing to them, but it would be unfair to her to keep her in poverty and want, when Providence afforded her such powerful protection. They consulted their village priests, and the result was that Elizabeth Lavenza became the inmate of my parents' house, my more than sister, the beautiful and adorned companion of all my occupations and my pleasures. Everyone loved Elizabeth, the passionate and almost reverential attachment with which all regarded her became, while I shared it, my pride and my delight. On the evening previous to her being brought to my home, my mother had said playfully, "I have a pretty present for you, for my Victor. Tomorrow he shall have it." And when on the morrow she presented Elizabeth to me as her promised gift, with childish seriousness, interrupted her words literally and looked upon Elizabeth as mine to protect, love, and cherish. All praises bestowed on her I received as made to a possession of my own. We called each other familiarly by the name of cousin. No word, no expression could boldly form the kind of relation in which she stood to me. My more than sister, since till death was to be mine alone. How did I know you were going to say that? First off, they are not bloodly related. So if you didn't understand any of that, basically from a very young age, Victor was told that eventually when he grew up and gets married, that Elizabeth will be his fiancée. So basically they are currently in a betrothal circumstance. That's what they got going on right now. All betrothed. Very nice. But they are not bloodly related. She was from a different family, and this was very common back in the day for people to take certain people under their wings. It was just a practice that happened, and sometimes, they would also set up these people that they would take under their wings with that of their own family members. So that then they would have the added protection to be safe and taken well care of under somebody else's household. And if you've ever actually watched Bridgerton, in season 2 of Bridgerton, this is basically what happens. That's what happens, is that, you know, she takes these people under her wing and into her home for protection reasons, to protect them. Yeah. So now we are on chapter 2. That was the end of chapter 1. I will see if we can get to chapter 3 today, but so let me describe to you guys first about how short these readings are. So each chapter is is only a few pages long, and the reason for that being is you'll see a lot of this in Victorian writing, of it being very short. This is Victorian Gothic writing, because I'm going to reference Bridgerton again, because if you remember that the pamphlets were always given out to people. So basically this would be in a newspaper, and you would read it in a newspaper. So it wasn't a published book until like later on. Eventually they would collect it all together and publish it, but usually most authors would actually publish pamphlet by pamphlet, and then once a week you would get a new chapter. So that's why the readings are going to be very short, and we might actually get to chapter 4 today, depending on things. So hold on, I'm going to take another big gulp of my tea before we continue on. So chapter 2. We were brought up together. There was not a quite different... So it's manga before manga. Yes, it. Basically, this was because making books back then was very expensive. Even though that they did have a printing press, it was still a lot more expensive to print a full book than to print pamphlet by pamphlet. So that's why a lot of authors actually chose that way. And then eventually, from all the money that they made from making the pamphlets, then they would print the books. And then you would have the book. So that's the style. Charles Dickens was different. Charles Dickens ended up being very, very popular and was able to just go to print with his books most of the time. But when he was first starting out, it was also pamphlet by pamphlet. But because Mary Shelley was a female writer, she did not have the money and obligation in order to have the money to afford to do that, possibly. I do need to look up the history a little bit about how she printed this and how she got it done, because I do want to find that out. But yes, this is a female author, by the way, that wrote Frankenstein. Which is pretty appropriate for me to read. But maybe for another Gothic reading, I'll try to read to you guys one of the first ever female Gothic writers. But that book is hard. Even I found it impossible to read. It's easy to read. It's just very long. But anyways, we were brought up together. There was not quite a year difference in our ages. I need not say that we were strangers to any species of disunion or dispute. Harmony was the soul of our companionship, and the diversity and contrast that oh my gosh. Hold on, I'm going to turn on a brighter light that actually might be helpful. The great thing is I don't need to go to the light switch, so excuse me as my face tracking slightly breaks for a minute. There you go. Hi, puppy. My dog has joined us. She wants to be included in the readings. The Fluffykins of the Fluffkins line has joined Victor. No, I'm joking. I'm joking. Oh, that's gonna be a lot easier to read. Usually I have the sun coming in, but now it's starting to get later in the day and the sun is moved. Yeah. Harmony was the soul of our companionship. Contrast that sustained, and our characters drew us nearer together. Elizabeth was of a calmer and more, oh my god, concentrated disposition. But with all my ardor, I was capable of a more intense application, and was more deeply smitten with a thirst for knowledge. She busied herself with following the aerial creations of the poets and the majestic and wondrous scenes which surrounded our Swiss home. The sublime shapes of the mountains, the changes of the seasons, tempest and calm, the silence of winter, and the life and turbulence of our alpine summers. She found ample scope of admiration and delight, while my companion contemplated with a serious and satisfied spirit the magnificent appearances of things. I delighted in investigating their causes. The world was to me a secret which I desired to divine. Curiosity, earnest research to learn the hidden laws of nature, gladness akin to rapture, as they were unfolded to me, are among the earliest sensations I can remember. Dude is a nerd. The entirety of Frankenstein is literally how a nerd got a little too nerdy and ended up creating something. Like, literally. I just realized Frankenstein could be IRL Legos. Oh, we are learning so much today. I have read this on my own, by the way, and I will say reading it to you guys aloud makes me go, oh wow, actually, if you think about this. So it's like me reading it a second time, which is kind of nice to do a second read through of it, you know? Because you see things that are there that you didn't see before. On the birth of a second son, my junior by 7 years, my parents gave up entirely their wandering life, oh my gosh, and fixed themselves in their native country. We possessed a house in Geneva, and a Compange, Compangen on Bellerive. I guess that's like a cabin of some sort, or a summer abode. The eastern shore of the lake. Yep, it's an eastern abode. So it means that they have a house in the city, and then they have a house out in the countryside, which was pretty much how a lot of lords and ladies lived back in that day. Even still today, a lot of people that are rich and fancy usually will have a summer house that they go to during the summer, and then a winter home or a city home that they come back to for city purposes. So, still happens even today. At the distance of rather more than a league from the city, so it is out there. We resided primarily in the latter, and the lives of my parents were possessed in consideration seclusion. So that means that they loved being out more instead of being in Geneva, even though that they had a home in Geneva, they decided to be more out in the countryside, because they just loved the seclusion and the scenes. It was my temper to avoid a crowd, and to attract myself favorably to a few. Aren't we all? we don't want to talk to people. I was indifferent, therefore, to my school fellows in general, but I united myself in the bonds of the closest friendship to one among them. Henry oh my gosh, I'm going to butcher this last name. Cellervale, there we go. Henry Cellervale was the son of a merchant of Geneva. He was a boy of singular talent and fancy. He loved enterprise, hardship, and even danger, for its own sake. He was deeply read in books of chivalry and romance. He composed heroic songs and began to write many a tale of enchantment and knightly adventure. He tried to make us act plays and to enter into masquerades, in which the characters were drawn from the heroes of Roncesvalles of the Round Table, of the Round Table of King Arthur, and the chivalrous train who shed their blood to redeem the holy scripture from the hands of the infidels. By the way, infidels was just anybody that wasn't under the Christian religion back in those days. And Roncesvalles was I think he was the one that first originally came up with the tales of Arthur. I have to look that up because there are many people that claim to have written the Tales of the Round Table, and just everyone claims to be the taker of it, and no one can find the original origin set of it. So that's also an interesting thing that she pulls in here. No human being could have possessed a happier childhood than myself. My parents were possessed by the very spirit of kindness and indulgence. We felt that they were not the tyrants to rule our lot according to their caprice, but the agents and creators of all the many delights which we enjoyed. When I mingled with other families, I distinctly discerned how peculiarly fortunate my lot was, and gratitude assisted the development of filial love. So it means he really, this dude had such a great childhood that we wish we all could have. That he actually loves his parents. Mm-hmm. My temper was sometimes violent, and my passions vehement. But by some law in my temperature, they were turned not towards childish pursuits, but to an eager desire to learn, and not to learn all things indiscriminately. I confess that neither the scripture of languages, nor the code of governments, nor the politics of various states possessed attractions for me. It was the secrets of heaven and earth that I desired to learn, and whether it was the outward substance of things, or the inner spirit of nature, and the mysterious soul of man that occupied me, with the inquiries were directed to the metaphysical, or in its highest sense, the physical secrets of the world. Dude wanted to become God, and wanted to know how God did God things. That's what I can discern from this. Meanwhile, Cereval occupied himself, so to speak, with the moral relations of things. The busy stage of life, the virtues of heroes, the actions of men were his theme, and his hope and his dreams was to become one among those whose names are recorded in history as the gallant and adventurous benefactors of our species. The saintly soul of Elizabeth shone like a dedicated lamp in our peaceful home. Her sympathy was ours, her smile, her voice, her sweet glance of her celestial eyes were ever there to bless and animate us. She was the living spirit of love to soften and attract. I might have become sullen in my study, rough through the ardor of my nature, but that she was there to subdue subdue me to a semblance of her own gentleness. And Saval could could aught ill entreat on the noble spirit of Saval? Yet he might not have been so perfectly humane, so thoughtful in his generosity, so full of kindness and tenderness amidst his passion for adventurous exploit, had she not unfolded to him the real lovingness of her benevolence, made the doing good the end and aim of his soaring ambition. So he ends up falling in love with her, I think, is what I... Honestly, this is not... It's very hard to read and just go over what exactly is going on. But both Victor and Cheval do love Elizabeth. I will say that much. But Victor became too much of an ass and just was deciding to go into his studies more. We will see that in Chapter 3. I feel exquisite pleasure in dwelling on the recollections of childhood, before misfortune had taunted my mind, and changed its bright visions of extensive usefulness into gloomy and narrow reflections upon itself. Besides, in drawing the picture of my early days, I also record those events which led, by insensible steps, to my after tale of misery. For when I would account to myself for the birth of that passion which afterwards ruled my destiny, I find it arise like a mountain river from ignoble and almost forgotten sources. But dwelling as it proceeded, it became the torment which, in its course, has swept away all my hopes and joys. Naturally, I can never say philosophical correctly. Hold on. Philosophy is natural philosophy. There we go. Is the genius that has regulated my fate. I desire, therefore, in this narration to state those factors which led to my predilection of that science. When I was 13 years of age, we all went on a party of pleasure to the baths near Thonson. The inclemency of weather obligated us to remain a day confined to the inn. In this house I chanced to find a volume of the works of Cornelius Agrippa. Why could I not say that in my head? I swear to God, I could not say Cornelius in my head correctly. I kept saying as Cornelius. Agrippa. I opened it with apathy. The theory which he attempts to demonstrate, and the wonderful facts which he relates, soon changed this feeling into enthusiasm. A new light seemed to dawn upon my mind, and bounding with joy, I communicated my discovery to my father. My father looked carelessly at the title page of my book and said, "Ah, Cornelius Agrippa. My dear Victor, do not waste your time upon this. It is sad trash." If instead to his remark, my father had taken the pains to explain to me that the principles of Agrippa had been entirely explored, and that a modern system of science had been introduced, which possessed much greater powers than the ancient, because the powers of the latter were chimerisal, while those of the former was real and practical. Under such circumstances, I should certainly have thrown Agrippa aside and have contented my imagination, warned as it was, by returning with greater ardor to my former studies. It is even possible that the train of my ideas would never have received the fatal impulse of my volume by no means assured me that he was acquainted with its contents. And I continued to read with the greatest avidity. So it means he continued to read even though that his father told him not to. When I returned home, my first care was to pronounce the whole works of this author, and afterwards of Pericoles and Albertus Mangus. I read and studied the wild fancies of these writers with delight. They appeared to me treasures known to few besides myself. I have described myself as always having been imbued with a fervent longing to oh my gosh, penetrate the secrets of nature. In spite of the intense labor and wonderful discoveries of modern philosophers, I always came from my studies discontented and unsatisfied. Sir Isaac Newton is said to have avowed that he felt like a child picking up shells beside the great and unexplored ocean of truth. Those of his successors in each branch of natural philosophy with whom I was acquainted appeared even to my boy's apparitions as tyros engaged in the same pursuit. The untaught pleasant beheld the elements around him, and was acquainted with their partial uses. The most learned philosopher knew little more. He had partly unveiled the face of nature. It's the small words. Why am I forgetting the small little words? Like, I know what they are. It's so stupid. Face of nature. But her immortal lineaments were still a wonder and a mystery. He might dissent anatomus. Oh my gosh. Anatomus. And give names, but not to speak of a final cause. Causes in their secondary and tertiary grades were utterly unknown to him. I had gazed upon the fortifications and impediments that seemed to keep human beings from entering the citadel of nature, and rashly, ignorantly, I had repined. But here were books, and here were men who had penetrated deeper and knew more. I took their words for all they averred, and I became their disciple. It may appear strange that such should arise in the 18th century, but while I followed the routine of education in the schools of Geneva, I was, to a great degree, self-taught with regard to my favorite studies. My father was not scientific, and I was left to struggle with a child's blindness added to a student's thirst for knowledge. Under the guidance of my new preceptors, I entered with the greatest diligence into the search of the philosopher's stone and the elixir of life. But the latter soon obtained my undivided attention. Wealth was an inferior object, but what glory would attend the discovery if I could banish disease from the human frame and render man invulnerable to any but a violent death? Nor were these my only visions. The rising of ghosts or devils was a promise liberally according by my favorite authors, the fulfillment of which I was eagerly sought, and my incantations were always unsuccessful. I attributed the failure rather to my own inexperience and mistake than to want of skill or fidelity in my instructions. and thus, for a time, I was occupied by exploring systems, mingling, like an unadept, a thousand contra- contradictory theories, and unfolding desperately in every sleuth of multifarious knowledge, guided by an adornment imagination and childish reasoning, till an ancient until an accident again changed the current of my ideas. When I was about 15 years old, we had retired to our house near Belvire, when we witnessed a most violent and terrible thunderstorm. It advanced from behind the mountains of Jura, and the thunder burst at once with frightful soundness from various quarters of the heavens. I remained while the storm lasted, watching it progress with curiosity and delight. As you should, sir. And deity of storms and winds over here, you should delight in it. As I stood at the door, on a sudden I beheld a stream of fire issue from an old and beautiful oak, which stood about 20 yards from our house, and soon as the dazzling light vanished, the oak had disappeared, and nothing remained but a blasted stump. When we visited it the next morning, we found the tree shattered in singular manner. It was not splintered by the shock, but entirely reduced in thin ribbons of wood. Oh shit, I lost my... Wait, what the heck? Oh, there we go. I never beheld anything so utterly destroyed. Before this, I was not unacquainted with the more obvious laws of electricity. On this occasion, a man of greater research and natural philosophy was with us, and, excited by this catastrophe, he entered on the explanation of a theory which he had formed on the subject of electricity and galvanism. Galvanism is magnets, which was at once new and astonishing to me. All that he said threw greatly into the shade Cornelius Agrippa, Albertus Magnus, and Paracelsus, the lords of my imagination. But by some faulty, the overthrow of these men disinclined me to pursue my accustomed studies. It seemed to me as if nothing would or could ever be known. All that had so long engaged my attention suddenly grew despicable. By one of these caprices of the mind, which we are perhaps most subject to in early youth, I at once gave up my former occupations, set down natural history, and all its progeny as a deformed and abortive creation, and entertained the greatest disdain for a would-be science which could never even step within the threshold of real knowledge. In this mood of mind, I betook myself to mathematics and branches of study apparenting to that science, as being built upon secure foundations and so worthy of consideration. Thus strangely are our souls constructed, and by such slight ligaments are we bound to prosperity or ruin. When I look back, it seemed to me that if this almost miraculous change of inclination and will was the immediate suggestion of the guardian angel of my life, the last effort made by the spirit of preservation to avert the storm that was even then hanging in the stars, and ready to envelop me, Her victory was announced by an unusual tranquility and gladness of soul, which followed the relinquishing of my ancient and latter tormenting studies. It was thus that I was to be taught to associate evil with their persecution, persecution, happiness with their disregard. It was a strong effort of the spirit of good, but it was inefficient. Inefficient. Yes. Destiny was too potent, and her immutable laws had declared my utter and terrible destruction. Well, that was a lot. So basically, Victor saw a tree explode from lightning. Which, yeah. I don't know if you guys ever have seen a lightning strike to a tree, but it can be beautiful and scary and just altogether a very interesting catastrophe and a very interesting oh my gosh, just a very interesting experience to view nature in its true and natural form. But with the end, that is the end of chapter 2, and we were moving swiftly into chapter 3. We may actually get to chapter 4 today, my guys. I've only just read up to I'm on chapter 5, so when we read through chapter 4, we will be stopping, and we will save the rest for next Saturday. So with that, let us begin chapter 3. This is when we really start to go from knowledge into the idea of his madness. This is why I called the section from knowledge to madness. Wait till we get to it. Chapter 3. When I had attained the age of 17, my parents resolved that I should become a student at the University of Okay, I'm going to butcher this name. Ingolstadt. I'm going to call it Ingo whenever it comes up, because that's the first 4 letters of it, and I can say that. I had hitherto attended the schools of Geneva, but my father thought it necessary, for the completion of my education, that I should be made acquainted with other customs than those of my native country. My departure was therefore fixed at an early date, but before the day resolved upon could arrive, the first misfortune of my life occurred, an omen, as it were, of my future misery. Elizabeth had caught the scarlet fever. If you don't know what the scarlet fever was, it was a really bad fever. Even nowadays, sometimes people get it. It's not as deadly anymore, but back then it was pretty deadly. Her illness was severe, and she was in the greatest danger. During her illness, many arguments had been urged to persuade my mother to refrain from attending upon her. She had at first yielded to our entries, but when she heard that the life of her favorite was menaced, she could no longer control her anxiety. She attended her sickened bed. Her watchful attentions triumphed over the malignity of the distemper. Elizabeth was saved, but the consequences of the impertinence were fatal to her persevere. On the third day, my mother sickened. Her fever was accompanied by the most alarming symptoms, and the looks of her medical attendants prognosticated. Oh my gosh. It's prognosticated. Oh my gosh, prognosticated the worst event. I think it means to show that something's gonna happen really badly. On her deathbed, the fortitude and benignity of this best of woman did not desert her. She joined the hands of Elizabeth and myself. "My children," she said, "my finest hopes of future happiness were placed on the prospect of your union. This expectation will now be consolation of your father. Elizabeth, my love, you must supply my place to my younger children. Alas, I regret that I am taken from you, and happy and beloved as I have been. It is not hard to quit at all. It is not hard to quit you all. Is it not hard to quit you all? But these are not thoughts of befitting me. I will endeavor to resign myself cheerfully to death, and will include hope of meeting you in another world." She died calmly, and her countenance expressed affection even in death. I need not describe the feelings of those whose dearest ties are rent by the most irreparable evil. The void that presents itself to the soul, and the despair that is exhibited on the continuance. It is so long before the mind can persuade itself that she, whom we saw every day, and whose very existence appeared a part of our own, can have departed forever, that the brightness of a beloved eye can have been extinguished, and the sound of a voice so familiar and dear to the ear can be hushed, never more to be heard. These are the reflections of the first day, but when the lapse of time proves the reality of this evil, then the actual bitterness of grief commences. Yet from whom has not the rude hand rent away some dear connection? And why should I describe a sorrow which all have felt and must feel? The time at length arrives when grief is rather an indulgence than a necessity, and the smile that plays upon the lips, although it may be deemed a sacrilege, is not banished. My mother was dead, but we had still duties which we ought to perform. We must continue our course with the rest, and learn to think ourselves fortunate, whilst one remains whom the spoil has not seized. My departure for Ingo, which had been deferred by these events, was now again determined upon. I obtained from my father a respite of some weeks. It appeared to me sacrilege so soon to leave the repose, akin to death, of the house of mourning and rush into the thick of life. I was new to sorrow, but it did not the less alarm me. I was unwilling to quit the sight of those that remained to me, and above all I desired to see my sweet Elizabeth in some degree consoled. She indeed veiled her grief, and strove to act the comforter of us all. She looked steadily on life and assumed its duty with courage and zeal. She devoted herself to those whom she had been taught to call her uncle and cousins. Never was she enchanting at this time, when she recalled the sunshine of her smiles and spent them upon us. She forgot even when her own regret in her endeavors to make us forget. The day of departure at length arrived. Serval spent the last evening with us. He had endeavored to persuade his father to permit him to accompany me and to become my fellow student, but in vain. His father was a narrow-minded trader and saw idleness and ruin in the aspirations and ambition of his son. Henry deeply felt the misfortune of being debarred from a liberal education. He said little, but when he spoke, I read in his kindling eye and in his animated glance a restrained but firm resolve, not to be chained to the miserable details of commerce. Oh, by the way, when it says that she veiled herself in her grief, back in the Victorian era, when you were grieving, everyone would wear black, and women would don a black veil over their face to show that they are in grieving. So that's what it means by she took up the veil. Now, another saying for it, if you read older Gothic literature or anything older, when someone says that they have taken up the veil, it means that they are becoming a nun. But this means in grievance, based on context. And also, Henry really, really wants to just become a literature nerd. A writer. He wants to be a writer. We sat late. We could not tear ourselves away from each other, nor persuade ourselves to say the word farewell. It was sad, and we retired under the pretense of seeking repose, each fancying that the other was deceived. But when at morning's dawn I descended to the carriage, which was to convey me away, they were all there. My father again to bless me, Serval to press my hand once more, and my Elizabeth to renew her entreaties that I would write often, and to bestow that last feminine attentions on my playmate and friend. I threw myself into the chassis that was to convey me away, and indulged in the most melancholy reflections. I, who had ever been surrounded by amiable companions, continually engaged in endeavoring to bestow mutual pleasure, I was not alone. In the university, whither I was going, I must form my own friendships and be my own protector. My life had hitherto been remarkably secluded and domestic, and this had given me invincible reputation to new counteresses. I loved my brothers, Elizabeth and Serval. These were old familiar faces. But I believed myself totally unfitted for the company of strangers. Such were my reflections as I commenced my journey, but as I proceeded, my spirits and hopes rose. I ardently desired the accusation of knowledge. I had often, when at home, thought it hard to remain during my youth cooped up in one place, and had longed to enter the world and take my station among other human beings. Now my desires were compelled with, and it would, indeed, have been fully to repent. I had sufficient leisure for these and many other reflections during my journey to Ingle, which was long and fatiguing. At length the high white steeple of the town met my eyes. I alighted and was conducted to my solitude apparent to spend the evening as I pleased. The next morning I delivered my letters of introduction and paid a visit to some of the principal professors. Chance, or rather the evil influence, the angel of destruction which arrested up, omnipotent, omnipotent, omnipotent sway over me from the moment I turned my reluctant steps from my father's door, led me first to M. Crimp, professor of natural philosophy. He was an uncouth man, but deeply imbued in secrets of his science. He asked me several questions concerning my progress in different branches of science, appear, oh my gosh, appertaining to natural philosophy. Appertaining to natural philosophy. I replied carelessly and partly in contempt, remained the names of my alchemists as the principal authors I had studied. The professor stared. "Have you," he said, "really spent your time in studying such nonsense?" I replied in the affirmative. "Every minute," continued, every minute, continued M. Creep, with warmth. "Every instant that you have wasted on those books is utterly an entirety lost. You have burdened your memory with explored systems and useless names. Good God! In what desert land have you lived, where no one has kind enough to inform you that these fancies, which have so readily embedded, are 1,000 years old and musty as they are ancient? I little expected, in this enlightened and scientific age, to find a discipline of Albert Magnus and Persepolis. My dear sir, you must begin your studies entirely anew." So saying, he stepped aside and wrote down a list of several books of natural philosophies, which he desired me to procure, and dismissed me after mentioning that in the beginning of the following week he intended to commence a course of lectures upon natural philosophy in its general relations, and that M. Waldman, a fellow professor, would lecture upon chemistry the alternate days that he omitted. I returned home, not disappointed, for I have said that I had long considered those authors useless whom the professor reprobated. But I returned not at all the more inclined to recur to those studies in any shape. M. Creep was a little squat man with a gruff voice and repulsive countenance. The teacher, therefore, did not proposes me in favor of his pursuits, in rather a too philosophical and connected a stain. Perhaps if I have given an account of the conclusions I had come to concerning them in my early years. As a child, I had not been content with the results promised by the modern professors of natural science, with a confusion of ideas only to be accounted for my extreme youth and my want of guide on such matters. I had retrod the steps of knowledge along the paths of time, and exchanged the discoveries of recent enquiries of dreams of forgotten alchemists. Besides, I had a contempt for the uses of modern natural philosophy, It was very different when the masters of science sought immorality and power. Immortality and power. Such views, although futile, were grand. But now the scene has changed. The ambition of the inquirer seemed to limit itself to the annihilate. Oh my gosh. And an annihilation. Annihilation. Okay, the annihilation of those visions on which my interest in science was chiefly founded. I was required to exchange chimeras of boundless grandeur for realities of little worth. Such were my reflections during the first 2 or 3 days of my residence at Ingle, which were chiefly spent in becoming acquainted with the localities, the principal residence in my new abode. But as the ensuing week commenced, I thought of the information that M. Creep had given my concerning the lectures, and although I could not consent to go and hear that little conceited fellow deliver sentences off of a pulpit, I recollected what he had said of M. Waldman, whom I had never seen, as he had hitherto been out of town. Partly from curiosity and partly from idleness, I went into the lecture room, which M. Waldman entered shortly after. This professor was very unlike his colleagues. He appeared about 50 years of age, but with an aspect expressive of the greatest benevolence. A few gray hairs covered his temples, but those of the back of his head were nearly black. His person was short, but remarkably erect, and his voice the sweetest I had ever heard. He began his lecture by recapitulation of the history of chemistry, and various empowerments made by different men of learning, pronouncing with fervor the names of the most distinguished discoveries. He then took a curious view of the present state of the science and explained many of its elementary terms. After having made a few propriety experiments, he concluded with a panegyric upon modern society, the terms which I shall never forget. The ancient teachers of this science, said he, promised impossibilities and performed nothing. The modern masters promise very little. They know the metals cannot be transmuted, and that the elixir of life is a chimera. But these philosophers, those hands seemed only made to dabble in dirt, and their eyes to pore over the microscope or crucible, have indeed performed miracles. They penetrate into the recesses of nature and show how she works in her hiding places. Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness. Thank you for the follow. Welcome in. We are currently reading that of Frankenstein. We are in the middle of chapter 3. Welcome, Oya. Ouya Gamer. Hold on. I'm going to take a minute to actually drink my drink. Yes, hiya. We're currently just in the middle of reading Frankenstein. This is a thing that I am doing for the month of October. We are currently in chapter 3. All that you have missed so far is kind of the beginning life of Victor von Frankenstein. And now he is currently at university hearing from a professor, that M. Waldman, and this man becomes his inspiration for a few things later down the line. There we go. gotta drink some tea every now and then because I'm just speaking and it's very hard. So let us continue reading what M. Walden has been saying. They penetrate into the recesses of the mind. Oh my goodness. Oh, recesses of nature, and show how she works in her hiding places. They ascend into the heavens. They have discovered how the blood circulates, and nature of the air we breathe. They have acquired new and almost unlimited powers. They can command the thunderstorms of heaven, mimic the earthquake, and even mark the invisible world with its own shadows. Such were the professor's words. Rather, let me say, such the words of the fate, in counts to destroy me. As he went on, I felt as if my soul were grappling with a playable enemy. One by one, the various keys were touched, which formed the mechanism of my belonging. Mechanism of my being, Chord after chord was sounded, and soon my mind was filled with one thought, one conception, one purpose. So much has been done. Explain the soul of Frankenstein. More, far more, will I achieve. Trending in the steps already marked, I will pioneer a new way, explore unknown powers, and unfold to the world the deepest mysteries of creation. And this is where the knowledge goes into madness. This is the paragraph where everything starts, people. This is the change. If you're ever writing something and you want to know how to do a change in a character's mind, or like trying to express it in a way, have something outwardly extend their change, like this. This is written so well. Mary Shelley, just great round of applause. I closed not my eyes that night. My internal being was in a state of insurrection and turmoil. I felt that order would thence arise, but I had no power to produce it. By degrees after the morning's dawn, sleep came. I awoke, and my yesterday's night thoughts were as a dream. There only remained a resolution to return to my ancient studies, and devote myself to science, for which I believed myself to possess a natural talent. On the same day, I paid M. Waldman a visit. His manners in private were even more mild and attractive than in public, for there was a certain dignity in this mien during his lecture, which in his own house was replaced by the greatest affabiliation. This is where the words slightly, I slightly lose the meaning of words. Affibulation and kindness. There we go. I gave him pretty nearly the same account of my former pursuits, and I had given to this fellow professor. I heard with attention the little narration concerning my studies, and smiled at the names of Cornelius Agrippa and Paracelsus, but without the contempt that M. Creep had exhibited. He said that these were men of those indefatigable. As you can see, I trip over words so easily. Indefeatable zeal, modern philosophers, there we go, were indebted for most of the foundations of their knowledge. They had left to us as an easier task to give new names, and arrange in connection classifications the facts which they in a great degree had been instruments of bringing to light the labors of men of genius. However, around, around, erroneously directed, scarcely ever fail in ultimately turning to the solid advantage of mankind. There we go. I listened to his statement, which was delivered without any presumption of affection, and then added that his lecture had removed my prejudices against modern chemists. I expressed myself in measured terms with a modesty and deference due from a youth to this instructor, without letting escape an experience in life would have made me ashamed any of the enthusiasm which stimulated my intended labors. I requested his advice concerning my the books I ought to procure. I am happy, said M. Walden, to have gained a disciple, and if your application equals your ability, I have no doubt of your successes. Chemistry is that branch of natural philosophy in which the greatest improvements have been made, and may be made, in which that account that I have made in which the greatest improvements may have been made. It is on that account that I have made in my peculiar study. But at the same time I have not neglected other branches of science. A man would make but a very sorry chemist if he attempted to that departure of human knowledge alone. If your wish is to become really a man of science, not merely a pretty experimentalist, I should advise you to apply to every branch of natural philosophy, including mathematics. He then took me into his laboratory and explained to me the uses of his various machines, instructing me as to what I ought to procure, and promising me the use of his own when I should have advanced far enough in the science not to derange their mechanism. He also gave me the list of books which I had requested, and I took my leave. Thus ended a day memorable to me. It decided my future destiny. And that is the end of chapter 3. I'm going to do a little stretch out a bit, because I have been doing this for almost an hour and 30 minutes. So, we're all going to take a little breather and a little stretch from everything, because it's going to be needed. But yeah. So what do you all think so far of Frankenstein and the divulging into madness so far? There are words that are pretty hard, but you know, it's been a lot of fun to read this. I like his ambition. Yes, his ambition to do things is very interesting, because a lot of people when they describe that of Frankenstein, now one thing that I'm gonna say is a little bit of a spoiler, but not very much. The monster is never called Frankenstein's monster. It's only called But the Monster. But yeah. I like the moment you can tell when the light bulb goes off in his head. Yes! It's very well written. I will say, if you ever want to look for like really good books of olden time, I will say, like, you know, go and read some of the older stuff. I will say one thing. There are some writers that I don't agree with of how they write certain things. And I will admit this, in all of Victorian writing, I love Frankenstein very much so far. It's very easy to read. It's very easy to understand kind of what's going on. Um, Dracula, on the other hand, you have no idea what's going on. You have to probably read through that thing like 3 times. Like, literally, I had to reread certain pages over again because I didn't know what was going on. He does not write situations very well. Um, but yeah, if you want to get into Gothic reading, like this is a pretty good one to kind of get into the idea of what Gothic is. And actually, again, I'm going to go over a little bit of the history of Frankenstein just really quickly near the end here. Like tools through multiple perspectives because it's like a dream. Yeah, so I actually have Dracula. I have started to read a little bit of it, but Dracula in itself is a collection of letters. Like, you know how at the very beginning of this we had the letters? The entirety of Dracula is only told through letters. It's interesting because of the way that's supposed to be written. But at the same time, the letters are never written well. Like, there's so much over explanation with certain things that it's just like, it suffers from over explanation and over detailing. Which I have noticed a lot of male Gothic writers do that. Not saying that every Gothic writer does it, but a lot of them do that. But it's if it's meant to be like to describe something that's very beautiful or something, like I understand that, but sometimes they over describe like everything. It's like I don't want you to over describe I don't want you to over describe the chassis of a car, okay? I'm sorry. He like over describes. I'm not even joking. Like in one part, I think he like over describes the train car that he's in, and I'm like, why? Why are you describing the train car in your letter to your wife? It doesn't make sense to me. So that kind of throws me off a little bit. I do want to read it, but again, it's if you want to read Dracula, just understand it's a kind of difficult read, in that sort of sense. But it is easy to tell what perspective it's being told by, because of course at the end of the letter it says who wrote it, but also at the beginning of the letter it says who it's being sent to. So that's also a helpful thing. To know whose perspective it's being told by. But anyways, do you guys want to continue on with chapter 4 and get to 2 hours with this? Because if not, I can stop here and we'll read chapter 4 next time. And I will say chapter 5 is where we start developing. Let's go. Okay. Otto, you want to keep hearing it, okay? Yeah. So, yeah. Let me just... Hold on. I'm gonna adjust a few things. Hold on. Because I've been sitting here for a while, so I'm going to just adjust myself a little bit, get a little bit of the stretchies in.
Whatever vibe you're into or feeling,
And yeah.
for that.
So this will probably only be the next few pages.
Take your audio experience to new
And,
levels, including off-
you'll start seeing the lights really go off in this chapter, and I know because I've read ahead. So I do try to read ahead for all of you so that then when I get to the reading, then it's not that difficult for me to read because I've already read it. Okay. I'm like kind of sucking on a cough drop every now and then to relube the vocal cords to continue on. Chapter 4. From this day, natural philosophy, and particularly chemistry in the most comprehensive sense of the term, became nearly my sole occupation. I read with ardor those works, so full of genius and discrimination, which modern enquiries have written on these subjects. I attended the lectures and cultivated the acquaintance of the men of science of the university. And I found even in M. Creep a great deal of sound sense and real information, combined, it is true, with a repulsive misogyny and manners, but not to that account the less valuable. In M. Waldman, I found a true friend. His gentleness was never tingled by dogmatism, and his instructions were given with an air of frankness and good nature that banished every idea of pedantry. Pedantry, there we go. In a thousand ways, he soothed me for me the path of knowledge. To my appreciation, my application was at first fluctuating and uncertain. It gained strength as I proceeded and soon became so ardent and eager that the stars often disappeared in the light of morning, whilst I was yet eager in my laboratory. As I appeared so closely, it may be easily convinced that my progress was rapid. Theodore was indeed the astonishment of the students, and my proficiency that of the masters. Professor Crimp often asked me, while a sly smile, how Cornelius Agrippa went on, whilst M. Malden expressed the most heartfelt exultation in my progress. 2 years passed in this manner, during which I paid no visit to Geneva, but was engaged heart and soul in the pursuit of those discoveries which I hoped to make. None but those who have experienced them can conceive to the enchantments of science, in which, in other studies, you go so far as others have gone before, and there is nothing more to know. But in a scientific pursuit, there is a continual food for discovery and wonderment. A mind of moderate capacity, which closely pursues one study, must infallibly arrive at great proficiency in that study. And I, who continually sought that attainment of one's object of pursuit, and was solely wrapped up in this, evolved so rapidly that at the end of 2 years I made some discoveries in the improvement of some chemical instruments, which procured me a great esteem and admiration at the university. When I had arrived at this point and had become as well acquainted with the theory and practice of natural philosophy as depending on lessons of any of the professors of Ingo, my residence there began no longer concluded to my improvements. I thought of returning to my friends in my native town, when an incident happened that protracted my stay. That protracted my stay. One of the phenomenon which had peculiarly attracted my attention was the structure of the human frame, and indeed, any animal endued with life. Whence I often asked myself, did the principle of life proceed? It was a bold question, and one which has even been considered as a mystery. Yet with how many things are we upon the brink of becoming acquainted, if cowardice or carelessness did not restrain our inquiries. I resolved these circumstances in my mind and determined therefore to apply myself more practically to those branches of natural philosophy which related to physiology. Unless I had been animated by an utmost supernatural enthusiasm, my application to the study would have been irksome and almost intolerable. To examine the causes of life, we must first recourse to death. I became acquainted with the science of anatomy, but this was not sufficient. I must also observe the natural decay and corruption of the human body. In my education, my father had taken the greatest precautions that my mind should be impressed with no supernatural horrors. I do not ever remember that to have trembled at a tale of superstition, or to have feared the apparition of a spirit. Darkness had no effect upon my fancy, and a churchyard was to me merely the receptacle of bodies deprived of life, which, from being the seat of beauty and strength, had become food for the worm. Now I was led to examine the cause and progress of this decay, and forced to spend days and nights in vaults and I think this is supposed to be chapel houses or mausoleums. I think is this supposed to be this word as well. What it also means. My attention was fixed upon every object and most insupportable to the decay of the human feelings. I saw how the fine form of man was degraded and wasted. I behold the corruption of death succeeded to the blooming cheek of life. I saw how the worm inherited the wonders of the eye and brain. I paused, examining and analysis all the minutiae of causation as exemplification in the change from life to death and death to life, until from the mists of darkness a sudden light broke in upon me, a light so brilliant and wondrous, yet so simple, and while I became dizzy with the immensity of the prospect which it illustrated, I was surprised that among so many men of genius who had directed their inquiries towards the same science, that I alone should be reserved to discover so astonishing a secret. Remember, I am not recording the vision of a madman. The sun does not more certainly shine in the heavens than that which I now affirm is true. Some miracle might have produced it, yet the stages of the discovery which distinct and probable. After days and nights of incredible labor and fatigue, I succeeded in discovering the causes of generation and life, nay more. I became myself capable of bestowing animation upon lifeless matter. The astonishment which I had at first experienced on this discovery soon gave place to delight and rapture. After much time and painful labor, to arrive at once at the summit of my desires was the most gratifying consummation of my toils. But this discovery was so great and overwhelming that all the steps by which I had been progressively led to it were obliged, and I beheld only the result. What had been the study of desire of the wisest men since the creation of the world was now within my grasp. Not that, like a magic scene, it all opened upon me at once. The information I had obtained was of a nature rather to direct my endeavors so soon as I should point them towards the object of my research, than the exhibit that object already accomplished. I was like an Arabin who had been buried with the dead, and found a passage of life aided only by one glimmering, seemingly ineffectual light. I see by your eagerness and the wonder and hope which your eyes express, my friend, that you expect to be informed of the secret with which I am acquainted. That cannot be. Listen patiently until the end of my story, and you will easily perceive why I am reserved upon the subject. Oh, by the way, this paragraph is him talking to Robert right now. I will not lead you on unguarded and ardent as I then was, to your destruction and infallible misery. Learn from me, if not by my perceptions, at least by my example, how dangerous is the acquirement of knowledge, and how much happier that man is who believes this native town to be the world, than he who aspires to become greater than his nature will allow. When I found so astonishing power placed within my hands, I hesitated a long time concerning the manner in which I should employ it. Although I possess the capacity of bestowing animation, yet to prepare a frame for the reception of it, with all its intricacies of fibers and muscles and veins, still remained a work of inconceivable difficulty and labor. I doubted at first whether I should attempt the creation of being like myself, or one of simpler organization, different organism. But my imagination was too much exiled by my first success to permit me to doubt of my ability to give life to an animal as complex and wonderful as man. The materials at present within my command hardly appeared adequate or so arduous an undertaking. But I doubted not that I should ultimately succeed. I prepared myself for a multitude of reverses. My appreciations might be insensible, baffled, and at least my work be imperfect. Yet when I consider the improvement which every day takes place in science and mechanics, I was encouraged to hope my present attempts would at least lay the foundations of future success. Nor could I consider the magnitude, the complexity of my plan as my argument of this impracticability. It was with these feelings that I began the creation of a human being. As the miniatures of the parts formed a great hindrance at my speed, I resolved, contrary to my first intention, to make the being of a gigantic nature. That is to say, about 8 feet in height, and proportionally large. After having formed this determination, and having spent some months in successfully collecting and arranging my materials, I began. No one can conceive the variety of feelings which bore me onwards like a hurricane in such enthusiasm of success. Sorry, let me take a little sip. Gotta get some more tea in me. I'm actually ending my tea. Soon I will have no more tea. Where was I? Having spent a collection of materials. No one can conceive the variety of feelings which bore me onwards like a hurricane. In the first enthusiasm of success, life and death appeared to me ideal bounds, which I should first break through and pour a torment of light into our dark world. Excuse me. A new species would bless me as its creator and source. Many happy and excellent natures would owe their being to me. No father could claim the gratitude of this child so completely as I should deserve theirs. Pursuing these reflections, I thought that if I could bestow animation upon lifeless matter, I might, in process of time, although I now found it impossible, renew life where death had apparently devoted the body to corruption. These thoughts supported my spirits, while I pursued my undertaking with unremitted ardor. My cheek had grown pale with study, and my person had become emaciated with confinement. Sometimes on the very brink of uncertainty I failed, yet still I clung to the hope that the next day, yes? Oh, thanks. It's okay. I got food. Thank you, Mom. My mother snuck in and brought me some food, so I will be eating that after I am done reading. Ooh, it smells delicious. Oh, my dog is in here now because I have food. Leia, go away. Leia, little doggy dog. Oh, you're scratching your neck. Well, where was I? Mom clutching it. What food? Oh, I got funny how we're talking. How Victor is talking about how he's like secluded himself, like not eating, not drinking, just everything into his studies, and then my mom sneaks in with some food. I got some food from one of our favorite diner area restaurants. Like, this is like a local place. Like, unless you're a local, you won't know where this place is. And I got a Monte Cristo sandwich, some fruit, and a sweet potato fries. And I got some ranch to dip them in, of course. Everything gotta be dipped in ranch. But yeah, that's for after stream. We're just gonna put that back on. There we go. Hey, yo, good stuff. Yeah, it's pretty good food. But we're almost done with this reading. So, yet I still clung to hope, which the next day or the next hour might release. One secret which I alone possessed was the hope to which I had just dedicated myself, and the moon gazed on my midnight labors, while, with unrelaxed and breathless eagerness, I persuaded nature to her hiding places. Who shall conceive the horrors of my secret toil as I dabbled among the unhallowed depths of the grave, or tortured a living animal to animate the lifeless clay? My limbs now tremble and my eyes swim with the remembrance, but then a restless and almost frantic impulse urged me forward. I seemed to have lost all soul or sensation but for this one pursuit. It was indeed but a passing trance. Not only made me feel with renewed acuteness as soon as the unnatural stimulus ceasing to operate, I had returned to my old habits. I collected bones from carnal houses and distributed with profound fingers the tenderness secrets of the human frame. In solitary chamber, or rather cell, atop of the house, and separated from all the other apartments by a gallery and staircase, I kept my workshop of filth creation. My eyeballs were starting. My eyeballs were staring from their sockets in attending to the details of my employment. The dissecting room and slaughterhouse furnished many of my materials, and often did my human nature turn with loathing from my occupation. Whilst still urged on by an eagerness which perpetually increased, I brought my work near to a conclusion. The summer months passed while I was thus engaged, heart and soul in one pursuit. It was a most beautiful season. Never did the fields bestow a more plentiful harvest, or vines yield a more luxuriant vintage. But my eyes were insensible to the chambers of nature, and the same feelings which made me neglect the scenes around me caused me also to forget those friends who were so many miles absent, and whom I had not even seen for so long a time. I knew my silence disquieted them, and I will remember the words of my father. I know you well, that while you are pleased with yourself, you will think of us with affection, and we shall hear regularly from you. You must pardon me if I regard any interruption in your correspondence as proof that your other duties are equally neglected. I knew well, therefore, that would be my father's feelings. But I could not tear my thoughts from my employment, loathsome in itself, but which had taken an irresistible hold of my imagination. I wished, as it were, to procrastinate all the related of my feelings of affection until the great object, which swallowed up every habit of my nature, should be completed. I then thought that my father would be unjust if he ascribed my neglect to voice or faultiness on my part. But I am now convinced that he was justified in conceiving that I should not be altogether free from blame. A human being in perfection ought also to preserve a calm and peaceful mind, and never to allow passion or transitionary desire to disturb his tranquility. I do not think that the pursuit of knowledge is an exception to this rule. If the study to which you apply yourself has a tendency to weaken your affections and to destroy your taste for those simple pleasures in which no alloy can possibly fix, then that study is certainly unlawful. That is to say, not befitting the human mind. If this rule were always observed, if no man allowed any pursuit whatsoever to interfere with the tranquility of his domestic affections, Greece had not been enslaved. Caesar would have been spared his country. America would have been discovered more gradually, and the empires of Mexico and Peru would not have been destroyed. But I forget that I am moralizing in most interesting part of my tale, and your looks remind me to proceed. My father made me no reproach in his letters, and only took notice of my silence, and inquired into my occupation more particularly than before. Winter, spring, and summer passed away during my labors, but I did not watch the blossom of the expanding leaves, sights which before always yielded my supreme delight. So deeply was I engrossed in my occupation. The leaves of that year had withered before my work drew to a close, and now every day showed me more plainly how well I had succeeded. But my enthusiasm was checked by my anxiety, and I appeared rather like one doomed by slavery to toil in the mines, or any other unwholesome trade, than an artist occupied by his favorite employment. Every night I was oppressed by a slow fever, and I became nervous to the most painful degree. The fall of a leaf startled me, and I shunned my fellow creatures, as if I had been guilty of a crime. Sometimes I grew alarmed at the wreck I perceived that I had become. The energy of my purpose alone sustained me. My labors would soon end, and I believed that exercise and amusement would then drive my inception in acceptant disease. And I promised myself both of these when my creation should be complete. Oh my gosh. I was about to say, and that's the end. That's actually the end of chapter 4. He is slowly, truly devolving into madness now. His entire laboratory, he is experimenting and cutting up things and trying to make something become alive. That's the end of chapter 4. And next time, we'll try and read chapter 5 to maybe, let's see. Well, if we did 4 chapters, oh, you know what? Let's try and finish volume 1 next week. We'll try to finish volume 1. Cause then we'll start on volume 2. There's 3 volumes in here. Leia, go out there and bark. Thank you. She ran out my door. But that seal bounce was that came at the right time because we are actually currently ending the stream. And you know what? Let me go and check who I can raid. Because I do have a few other people that are on here that should be live. Oh my gosh, there's so many. Here, let us see if we can raid somebody. We could raid the Ray. But you know what? We raided Ray last time. Let's go and raid my other friend who is playing Genshin Impact currently. So we go from the dark depths of this part into Genshin. Which actually I think is pretty befitting considering all of this. But yes, we will be continuing this. We will probably finish volume 1. Little Scorpion. Yes, we are going to be raiding the little Scorpion. Actually, IRL, I am a Scorpio, and my birthday is coming up next month. I will be kind of doing a little bit, I know I did a birthday bash in June, but I'll be doing Basie. Yeah, Basie. We're going to be doing Basie. Yes. The good little good little Basie. But yeah, we're gonna be doing her. But yeah, I am going to be having a little bit of a birthday thing, because it will be my actual birthday. I forgot to say that I found an art studio. Ooh, really? Nice. Figure drawing ones. Ooh, they do? Oh, I wish I could lived over by you. Oh, I would love to do that. That seems fun. But anyways, thank you all so much for sitting and listening to this reading. I also do hope that you like this new setup with me actually putting the book here so that then you can see it, and then me actually having a book and reading the book. So anyways, without further ado, let me go into Bazy's chat. Jose, can you get the raid setting things going? So we have non-subbed a non-subbing one, and we have a subbed one. So the first one is just the no if you're not subbed. So we're gonna use that one, and the second one will be for subs only. So don't use that one. Yeah, no, it's this one's always a lot. But with that, let's do slash raid the beautiful, amazing Nyx. Let me make sure I spelled it right. P-S-B-A-S-I-E. Yep, I spelled it right. Okay. So with that, I want to say thank you all so much for watching. And I shall see you all next time. Or may the wind guide you until next time. Goodbye.
Sung gerbes, balge balge bal.